What I want to go
false.
through is to talk about why you are a failure. We just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset. You were so upset about which are the ones tied to Trump. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real. You know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists.
That we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history.
Representative Jasmine Crockett arrived with a sweeping accusation against FBI Director Kash Patel, moving from his resume to alleged personnel removals, diverted agents, political death threats, public mistakes surrounding a major apprehension, and threats directed at historically black colleges and universities. But the structure of the confrontation matters as much as the language. Crockett did not conduct an extended cross-examination. She delivered an indictment. Patel disputed one factual premise.
I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission.
Was told that no question had been asked, and then waited until Crockett's time had expired before offering his defense. That means the real issue is not simply who sounded stronger. The issue is which claims were supported, which claims were merely asserted, and whether Patel's final list of FBI accomplishments actually answered the specific failures Crockett placed on the table. Crockett begins with the fact that can be checked easily.
So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real.
Christopher Wray was nominated to lead the FBI by Donald Trump. That point matters because Crockett is challenging the effort to treat every investigation involving Trump as the creation of an agency controlled entirely by Trump's political opponents. But then Crockett moves from a verifiable appointment history to a much broader claim about Kash Patel. She calls Patel the least qualified director in FBI history and says he is the only director who had never served inside the FBI before taking over. Watch Patel's response carefully. He does not defend his broader resume in this moment. He disputes the factual premise with two words. That's false. The hearing never pauses to resolve the disagreement. The first factual distinction is straightforward. Donald Trump did nominate Christopher Wray as FBI director in June 2017, and Wray was sworn in that August. Donald Trump also later nominated Kash Patel to replace Wray. The second claim is not nearly as clean. Calling Patel the least qualified director is a political judgment, not a fact that the footage can independently prove. The narrower assertion that Patel was the only FBI director who had never previously served in the Bureau is disputed on camera and is not supported by any comparative lists or historical record displayed during Crockett's remarks. Patel's answer is also incomplete. Saying that's false identifies a disagreement, but it does not tell the audience which previous FBI directors entered the position without Bureau experience, which part of Crockett's wording Patel rejects, or what experience Patel considers equivalent to service inside the FBI. Crockett then cuts him off because she has not asked a question. Procedurally, she is entitled to control her time. Substantively, that choice leaves the first dispute unresolved. Crockett does not remain on Patel's resume for long. Her next move is more serious because it changes the standard from experience to public safety and turns a disputed qualification claim into an accusation that Patel's leadership has placed people at risk. The next section contains several different allegations compressed into one argument. Crockett says Patel targeted career officials before his confirmation, sought improper firings, focused on cases connected to Donald Trump, and gave Americans no reason to feel safer under his leadership. Those propositions should not be treated as interchangeable. Evidence that an official advocated personnel changes would not automatically prove that the firings were illegal. Evidence of political motivation would not automatically establish that criminal investigations were compromised. And a lawmaker's lack of confidence, however sincere, is not itself proof that the FBI failed to protect a specific person. The key editorial task is to preserve Crockett's actual argument without presenting her conclusions as findings of facts.
What I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you.
Crockett's attack is forceful, but the footage does not establish every link in the chain she constructs. First, she alleges that Patel was involved in targeting career officials and directing illegal firings before he was confirmed. That is an allegation requiring personnel records, communications, court filings, testimony, or an investigative finding. None appears in this excerpt. Second, Crockett argues that investigations involving Donald Trump had passed through Christopher Wray, whom Trump originally appointed. That rebuts the simplest partisan slogan that every action taken under Wray can be dismissed merely because Wray was appointed by a Democratic president. It does not prove that every individual investigation was fair, correctly predicated, or free from political influence. Third, Crockett refers to death threats and an attempt to kill one of her colleagues. Those incidents may create a legitimate oversight question about protective intelligence and domestic threat prioritization. The footage does not demonstrate that the FBI under Patel received actionable intelligence and failed to act, or that a different director would necessarily have prevented the threats. Crockett is presenting a case about confidence. She has not yet presented a documented case about causation. Crockett's next step is designed to answer the obvious criticism that she is talking only about threats against Democrats. She brings forward examples involving Republicans who allegedly received death threats after opposing Jim Jordan, and those reports are admitted into the committee record.
And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Ken Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed, to do their jobs. You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner, to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there. Even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for The Apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem.
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Crockett is arguing that politically motivated threats are not confined to one party, and that Republican officials can also become targets when they break with a powerful faction. But pay attention to what these reports can prove. They may document threats against particular lawmakers. They do not by themselves establish Crockett's broader national claim that the vast majority of threats come from right-wing extremism. Proving that proposition would require a defined data set, a time period, a classification standard, and a reliable government or research source. The unanimous consent process confirms that the submitted materials were accepted into the committee record. It does not mean that Chairman Jim Jordan agreed with Crockett's interpretation, authenticated every detail in the articles, or conceded her claim about the national source of extremist threats. That distinction is essential. The reports appear relevant to Crockett's narrower point. Republican lawmakers reportedly faced threats after voting against Jordan. The examples undermine any simplistic narrative that political intimidation affects only one party. They are much weaker as evidence for Crockett's broader statistical claim. 3 reported cases cannot establish the national proportion of threats attributable to any ideology. They do not identify the total number of incidents, how the threats were classified, whether perpetrators were identified, or whether the FBI had opened investigations. Crockett therefore succeeds in placing concrete examples on the table, but she has not yet connected those examples to a comprehensive threat assessment or to a documented failure by Patel. The reports establish that political threats cross party lines. They still do not answer Crockett's operational question, whether Patel is building an FBI capable of handling those threats while agents are being reassigned, experienced personnel are leaving, and staffing gaps remain open. Crockett now delivers the most information-dense portion of her argument. She attributes a 14-year staffing timeline to Patel's Senate testimony, accuses the Bureau of redirecting agents into immigration enforcement, says experienced personnel are being removed, criticizes Patel for publishing 2 erroneous posts about an apprehension, and argues that the suspect might not have been located without assistance from the suspect's parents. These are separate claims requiring separate evidence. The staffing projection should be compared with Patel's exact Senate testimony. Agent reassignment should be measured through deployment orders or staffing data. Personnel removals should be examined case by case. The public posts can be checked directly. The role played by the suspect's parents should be compared with official investigative timelines. Stacking the claims makes the attack sound overwhelming. It also prevents any one claim from being fully tested inside Crockett's allotted time. This passage contains Crockett's most testable claims, but none is verified by the footage alone. The 14-year statement needs context. Was Patel describing the time required to eliminate an existing hiring deficit, reach an authorized staffing level, replace anticipated retirements, or expand the Bureau beyond its current size? Removing the surrounding Senate exchange could materially change its meaning. The ICE allegation also requires precision. The fact that FBI personnel assist another federal operation does not automatically prove that core FBI responsibilities have been abandoned. The relevant questions are how many agents were reassigned, for how long, from which squads, and what investigations were delayed. Crockett's criticism of Patel's public posts is analytically separate. A director can contribute to a successful investigation and still communicate prematurely or inaccurately. Conversely, the fact that a suspect's parents provided decisive information does not prove that federal or local investigators had done nothing useful before that contact. Crockett frames the family's cooperation as evidence that the Bureau could not find the suspect. The footage establishes only that she made that argument. Crockett then moves beyond staffing and one apprehension. She points to threats against historically black colleges and universities and argues that Patel's silence reveals a deeper failure in how the FBI defines and confronts domestic extremism. This is the emotional peak of Crockett's presentation. She describes threats targeting HBCUs as domestic terrorism, says she heard no meaningful response from the FBI, and connects those incidents to a broader history of white supremacist violence against black children, communities, and churches. The footage supports one conclusion immediately. Crockett believes the FBI is not treating the threat with sufficient urgency. It does not resolve several essential factual questions. Were the HBCU threats officially classified as domestic terrorism? Were suspects or ideological motives identified? Did the FBI issue statements through field offices rather than the director personally? Were investigations underway but not publicly discussed? Without those answers, Crockett's argument should be presented as an accusation about priorities, not proof that the FBI ignored the incidents. Crockett has now reached the core of her political case, but the evidentiary foundation remains incomplete. She identifies a real oversight category, what the FBI knew about threats to HBCUs, how those threats were classified, what resources were assigned, and what the director communicated publicly. Those questions can be answered through official threat bulletins, field office statements, arrest records, interagency communications, and testimony from the Counterterrorism Division. The excerpt contains none of those records. Crockett also broadens the argument from the specific HBCU incidents to white supremacist violence generally. That concern cannot be dismissed merely because her presentation is confrontational. At the same time, the footage does not identify the perpetrators behind the HBCU threats or demonstrate that every incident she references arose from the same ideology. Most importantly, Patel has not yet been given space for a full answer. Crockett's time expires immediately after the accusation. That makes the next sequence crucial. The committee majority can invite Patel to address staffing, resources, personnel, the public posts, HBCU threats, and domestic extremism. Instead, the first response is a defense of Patel's resume. Crockett has accused Patel of failing on qualifications, staffing, political violence, public communication, and domestic extremism. When the committee majority finally gives Patel a clear opening to answer, the response shifts the standard entirely, from the unanswered allegations to the results Patel says the FBI is producing. The final sequence has 3 layers. Chairman Jim Jordan begins by listing Patel's work as a public defender, prosecutor, House Intelligence Committee staffer, National Security Council official, intelligence official, and Defense Department Chief of Staff. That answers the suggestion that Patel entered government without relevant experience. It does not establish prior FBI service, and it does not answer Crockett's operational allegations. Representative Russell Fry then characterizes the Democratic presentation as a clickbait audition and asks Patel whether he cares to respond. Patel does not revisit every accusation. He rejects the premise that hostile criticism should determine his leadership and offers a different scoreboard: child predator arrests, drug seizures, murderer apprehensions, and a historically low murder rate. Listen for the missing details. Patel gives categories of success, but no numbers reporting period, baseline, or source inside this excerpt. Patel's answer is direct in one respect. He does not care about personal criticism if the FBI is succeeding. It is indirect in nearly every other respect. Patel does not address Crockett's claim about the 14-year staffing timeline. He does not explain how many agents were reassigned to immigration operations. He does not discuss the career officials she says were removed. He does not address the 2 allegedly erroneous public posts. He does not explain the FBI response to the HBCU threats. He does not state how the Bureau is measuring the threat from white supremacist extremism. Instead, Patel disputes Crockett's entire framing by claiming that the Bureau's results are stronger than ever. That is a legitimate defense only if the metrics can be independently verified and compared against an appropriate baseline. More child predators than ever before requires a defined measurement: arrests, indictments, convictions, rescued victims, or open cases. More drugs requires quantities, substances, and time periods. A historic rate of capturing murderers requires a comparison against prior administrations or prior years. A claim about the lowest murder rate in recorded history requires national crime data, a clear reporting period, and an explanation of whether Patel is claiming causation or merely describing a broader trend. The transcript does not provide those details. Patel's response therefore succeeds as a declaration of confidence. It does not function as a complete factual rebuttal to Crockett's individual allegations.